Which planet comes to mind first when it comes to colonizing celestial bodies? Whose face immediately comes to mind? Naturally, it's dusty Mars and the legendary Musk. We probably know more about the red planet than about any of our other neighbors, but still not everything. Recently, the European Space Agency published a photo clearly showing colonies of Martian spiders. It might seem like this is the answer to the question of whether there is life on Mars, but that's not all the news. Recent studies show that there is water on the red planet, but not at all where we expected. So what is mysterious Mars still hiding from us? Hubble, subscribe. The planet named after the god of war, the fourth from our parent star, belongs to the terrestrial group of celestial bodies. This means that Mars is made up of solid rocks, and its internal structure is similar to Earth's. There is a core at the center, as well as a mantle and a crust. The question arises, if Mars is so similar to Earth, why aren't we on Mars yet? Unfortunately, that's pretty much where the similarities end. If we look at it with complete objectivity, Mars isn't a very comfortable environment for humans, even in a modern spacesuit. The pressure on its surface is 160 times lower than on Earth. Because of the extremely thin atmosphere, the average temperature is minus 63 degrees Celsius, and there are almost constant dust storms raging there. Some storms can cover the sky with an impenetrable veil for half a year or even longer. Mars is always close to Earth. The first year forces futurist scientists to think about terraforming and colonizing the planet. And once again, old Ilon comes to mind. Terraforming is a long process that can take centuries or even millennia. After all, it will be necessary to radically change a number of Mars's physical characteristics, increase atmospheric pressure and temperature, create something similar to an ozone layer to protect against harsh ultraviolet radiation, as well as form the planet's magnetic field and biosphere. What little things, right? But before apple trees start blooming on Mars, we could at least try to colonize it. Astrobiologists primarily focus on finding liquid water. What is the Martian hydrosphere like, according to the latest scientific research? Strictly speaking, Martian water reserves cannot be called a hydrosphere because a hydrosphere requires certain temperatures. The water has long since turned into ice harder than stone, so astrophysicists call it a cryolithosphere. Based on observations that began in the 19th century, it is clear that there is water on Mars, but very little of it, and most of it is concentrated in the polar caps. Many people draw analogies with Antarctica, saying that such extreme places are formed according to a similar principle. But in August 2024, the scientific world was rocked by a sensation. Scientists found liquid water on Mars for the first time, although it is not easy to reach. This is truly a breakthrough, because previously all research was focused either on the polar caps or on traces of vapor in the Martian atmosphere. How was this sensation discovered? Since 2018, the Mars InSight lander probe has been operating on Mars. For 4 whole years, it was in a kind of hibernation, carefully listening to the voices of the planet and recording the tremors of the crust. It is his research that indicates that liquid water is hidden at a depth of 10 to 20 kilometers. Considering the fact that even on Earth, we have only managed to drill a shaft just 12 kilometers deep. Afterward, for unclear reasons, we stopped this activity. Hoping for a similar mission on Mars is foolish, at least for now. Was there water on the young surface of Mars? And where did it go? The channels of dried up rivers, craters, and lakes clearly suggest that Mars was not always so dry and waterless. Scientists believe that some of the water evaporated along with the atmosphere millions of years ago, but some reserves of life-giving moisture still went underground. By analogy with our own groundwater, the probe detected deposits of liquid at its location, but that doesn't mean similar things aren't being registered elsewhere. What is the scale of these water reserves? According to astronomers' estimates, there could be enough underground water to cover the entire surface of Mars, with an ocean 1.5 kilometers deep and turn it into a Miller planet. Does this mean that if water is hidden underground, then habitats for Martians could also be located there? The planned colonization of Mars also aims to answer this question. A significant advantage is also that the soil of the red planet, although dry, is filled with nutrients for growing plants. Matt Damon managed to grow a potato plantation in his module. Why can't we do it though? Let's get back to Martian water. If the surface of the red planet was once covered by bodies of water, they must have affected the geological structure of the celestial body. Simply put, ordinary rocks can tell us a lot about this issue. Let's pay attention to phyllosilicates. The many sheet silicates covering the surface of Mars are formed exclusively from rocks that have been in prolonged contact with water. This fact can also be considered indirect evidence of Mars's watery past. At one time, the Curiosity rover repeatedly sent photos of rocks that were clearly affected by water, and by a real, powerful stream at that. If we combine these studies with the collection of meteorites that have ever fallen to Earth from Mars, Allen Hills, 84,001, then the thoughts about life on the red planet become more and more distinct. The mentioned meteorite was discovered in Antarctica at the end of December 1984 and was named after the mountains where it was found, under high magnification. It was discovered that the rocky visitor, which left Mars about 15 million years ago, carries the remains of nanobacteria that we can only imagine in theory for now. Scientists unanimously claim that the meteorite Allen Hills 84001 comes from the era of the so-called wet Mars, but recently a new name has been added to the stone chronicle of the red planet. The fact is that on September 25, 2024, the Perseverance rover discovered something extremely strange. What was it? The rover was aptly named Perseverance because even though it moves at a turtle's pace, it has already covered 40 kilometers across the rough Martian terrain. And all of this since 2021. Right now, the rover is inside the Jezero impact crater, which is 49 kilometers in diameter. As the name suggests, this site is believed to be a former lake basin about 2.5 kilometers deep. That's exactly where Perseverance was sent. The probe has been searching for ancient rocks on the floor and slopes of this crater for 3 years now, and finally found something interesting. It's a rock with an unusual texture, resembling a zebra or light marble. It's already been named Freya's Castle, after the Norse goddess of love who lived in the heavenly city of Asgard. But what's so surprising about it? Isn't it just another boring rock? No, because this 20-centimeter stone is absolutely unique. Nothing like it has been found on the surface of Mars in any of its locations. So far, the rover has transmitted rather scant information about the composition of this artifact, but it's obvious that the stone is loose and different from the rock typical for this crater. That is, it's quite possible that it was brought here, for example, by a stream of water, or the stone simply rolled here from another part of the planet. In any case, the discovery has sparked increased interest among the astronomical community, so research is ongoing. What is your opinion about the news of spiders on the surface of the red planet in April 2024? Frightening images were published on the European Space Agency website. They were obtained by the Trace Gas Orbiter and Mars Express probes. The images display whole colonies of giant black spiders based on their size and the photo distance. A large swarm of insects gathered in the city of the Incas, a Martian site visually similar to the ancient mountain city in Peru. The Mariner 9 probe discovered this amazing place. It's absolutely unclear how these geometrically perfect linear ridges could have formed. There is a theory that the Martian dunes gradually turned to stone over time. Whatever created this location, black spiders in countless numbers have gathered here in an area about 86 kilometers in diameter. Putting aside their panic, scientists began to study the images, and after that, they calmed down a bit. It turned out that the resemblance to spiders was purely visual. In reality, these are peculiar geysers caused by climate changes on Mars. In winter, carbon dioxide from the atmosphere partially freezes and accumulates as dry ice. When the spring sunlight, remember, the images were taken at the end of April, illuminates these accumulations, the ice begins to melt, turns into a gas, and bursts to the surface in the form of fountains. But why are these geysers black? Along with the ice, dark material from beneath the Martian crust comes to the surface. As a result, black spider-like patterns are formed, each up to 1 kilometer in diameter. But looking at these images, it's still impossible to shake the thought that swarms of disgusting spiders are crawling on the surface of Mars. The red planet is an object of interest that will never fade as long as intelligent human civilization exists. For example, a Mars transport ship has been planned for years. The launch of Starship has been initiated by SpaceX since 2016, but the project is still in the development stage. In 2030, the Chinese are planning to launch a second automatic interplanetary station. Tianwen-3.1, with a similar name, is already successfully operating on Mars. And the cherry on top is a manned flight to the red planet. Since the 1950s, several projects have been developed to send a crewed spacecraft to Mars. Since 2010, the 100-year Starship mission has been in development, which involves sending colonists to the red planet with no return. Why with no return? The reason is simple. It's much cheaper this way, since the expedition will already cost $750 billion. The landing is planned in places where artificial objects have previously landed successfully. So, what do we have if we sum up all the findings, discoveries, and research related to our rusty neighbor? Mars is often figuratively called a planet of the past, a planet subtly hinting that millions of years ago, rivers flowed on its surface, seas roared, vegetation thrived, and possibly representatives of an intelligent civilization lived there. Bradbury's The Martian Chronicles wasn't far from reality. Right now, Mars isn't very hospitable for Earthlings. Planet-wide dust storms with wind speeds up to 100 meters per second, no water on the surface, a thin atmosphere, extremely low pressure, and fine-grained soil. In a short time, it disables any equipment from Earth modules if they are ever installed on Mars. But still, it's one of the most promising options in our vicinity. We're not going to fly to Jupiter after all. The Hubble channel is taking bets. What discovery awaits us next on Mars? And will a manned mission head to the red planet anytime soon? Go in the comments. Mars is the most visited planet in our neighborhood. Probes regularly send messages from there, but recently one circumstance shocked scientists and raised a lot of questions. Why are there seasonal fluctuations in oxygen concentration on Mars? Why is this most often recorded over Gale Crater? And does this mean that someone is breathing on Mars? Let's try to figure it out right now. Couple, subscribe. Let's start with the last one. The presence of oxygen does not equal the presence of life on a celestial body. This gas can also be produced by inorganic processes. This means that for now, there's no need to imagine lush forests and highly developed megacities rising between the red Martian dunes. Humanity has been actively searching for life on this planet since the 19th century, but so far without success. If earlier research was based on fantasies featuring mythical Martians, either kind or warlike, modern developments have shifted focus a bit. Now scientists are looking for chemical traces of current or past life on Mars, and they are also monitoring for the presence of anaerobic bacteria. Of course, astronomers are primarily interested in oxygen. It is precisely this element that is connected to the results of observations by 2012. This impact crater is impressively ancient, about 3.8 billion years old. For reference, the solar system is 4.5 billion years old. So, when scientists choose a landing site for a probe, this factor becomes a priority. Why? Astronomers hoped that the crater would serve as a kind of archive, preserving evidence of the red planet's past, information about a time when life might have existed here. But the discovery turned out to be even more unexpected. So who, after all, is breathing on Mars in Gale Crater, and what was discovered there? In addition to the oxygen emissions, it's worth noting the eroded sedimentary rocks among the interesting findings, which may be lake deposits. Subtitles are evidence of the past from which we can also conclude that there were bodies of water on Mars. Although discussions about the origin of the discovered sedimentary rocks are still ongoing, and scientists can't seem to reach a consensus at all. Not only the evidence provided by the probes, but also numerous photos from orbit showing branched river networks, huge river valleys, and deep canyons support this theory. Most likely, Mars once had a lot of water. Perhaps some seas are now buried under a kilometer-thick layer of rusty sand. And what about the news regarding oxygen? The atmosphere of the red planet is deadly for a human without a spacesuit. If you landed on the surface of Mars, got out of the shuttle, and tried to take even a single breath, you would definitely suffocate. It is much thinner than Earth's atmosphere, many times more so than at the summit of Everest. Carbon dioxide makes up 96% of the Martian atmosphere. But when it comes to Gale Crater, scientists were in for a surprise with what the Curiosity rover discovered there. Strange anomalies have been observed over this crater. The atmosphere above it consistently increases its oxygen content in spring and summer, but by autumn, the level drops back to normal. Actually, the presence of oxygen on Mars is not news. A small amount of it has been found in the atmosphere, measured in hundredths of a percent. However, over Gale Crater, the situation changes. During the warmer seasons, its concentration in the air increases by up to 30%, and as it gets colder, it decreases. Therefore, it gives the impression that oxygen is being produced by someone or something released into the atmosphere and then drawn back in. What does scientific studies say about this? Astrophysicists have found that during the Martian winter, atmospheric pressure drops, and with it, the level of carbon dioxide also decreases. This is explained by the fact that the element freezes at the poles of Mars, because the winters there are harsh. When it gets warmer, the gas thaws and begins to evaporate, which increases the atmospheric pressure again. The other gases in the Martian atmosphere behave in a similar way, except for oxygen. Why is this situation observed over Gale Crater? What triggers the release of oxygen and then brings everything back to the previous levels again? There are many hypotheses, and the most popular one says that water or carbon dioxide breaks down in the Martian atmosphere and turns into oxygen. However, to raise the concentration of this gas to an incredible 30, there would have to be 5 times more water in the atmosphere than there is now. In general, scientists at the moment don't know how to explain this sudden spike. And then there's an equally inexplicable drop, as if it's some kind of closed mine where intelligent beings live, like the characters in Wells's novel. Is it like in The First Men in the Moon? Or did some highly developed civilization set up underground production sites on Mars? Then why haven't the probes seen a single living soul during all their time on the red planet? Maybe you have some theories. What discoveries has the National Aeronautics and Space Administration Perseverance rover delighted the world with? In March 2025, the journal Nature reported on a discovery presented at the Lunar and Planetary Science Conference by Perseverance. In the Jezero crater, it discovered a strange leopard-patterned rock. This crater is most likely the bottom of a huge lake that splashed on Mars billions of years ago. The rock found by the rover is not quite ordinary. It has dark spots with rims. Similar structures are created by Earth microbes when they react with minerals. So this could be a chemical curiosity or evidence of Martian life. When Perseverance analyzed what the boulder was made of, it turned out that the dark spots were rich in fluorine, phosphorus, iron, and sulfur, which once again proves the microbial origin of these structures. Microorganisms can consume iron and in return release substances that form similar patterns. However, all of this could have appeared without the involvement of living organisms. Among other things, scientists analyzed the rock itself and found that it had not been subjected to heating. This means that if there are traces of microbes on the surface of the boulder, they have not been erased. Final conclusions can only be made when the samples arrive on Earth. Studying the material with isotopic methods on Mars is impossible. In any case, this is one of the most prominent and significant pieces of evidence of possible Martian life. If we combine the leopard stones and the seasonal oxygen emissions in Gale Crater, it suggests that the assumptions about Mars being habitable are not so unfounded. Did the Perseverance rover stop there, or did it surprise us with some other interesting discovery? In addition to the leopard stones it discovered on the surface of Mars, stone blueberries, small round pebbles that really do look a lot like that berry. However, it's not the first to find such spherical structures. Before this, Opportunity and Curiosity had discovered them in different places on Mars. The second probe photographed this strange discovery right in Gale Crater. The new spherules, as scientists called them, were found by Perseverance on the slope of Hazelwitch Hill in Jezero Crater. And it's not just a pile of spherical stones, but an entire rock made up of them. The diameter of the spherules is about 1 millimeter. Where did they originate and how did they form? There are several hypotheses, but only a few main ones. 2 of the stones were deposited from water in the voids of rocks, which suggests a watery past for Mars. Or are they evidence of a massive eruption, a meteorite impact, or any event accompanied by lava flows? In any case, this discovery will be helpful in studying the geological history of the red planet. Let's return to the unusual oxygen emissions in Mars's atmosphere. Is it possible, in the context of future colonization, to produce this valuable gas for humans artificially? The Perseverance rover, thanks to the latest developments, has done this. Among other things, the device was equipped with MOXIE, a unique system capable of acting like a tree, inhaling carbon dioxide and exhaling oxygen. If we describe the process in simple terms, it's not complicated. MOXIE is equipped with a pump that draws in Martian air. Then, inside the device, the work begins to boil. Using electrochemical tricks, the device literally separates oxygen from carbon dioxide molecules atom by atom. To make this possible, a very high temperature is needed, about 800 degrees Celsius. That's why the device's body is protected by an innovative heat-resistant casing, and its surface is coated with a thin layer of gold that reflects infrared rays. So colonization of Mars is now literally on the doorstep. The amazing device will allow us to breathe on the red planet? Not so fast. A 4-astronaut expedition will need a ton of oxygen to survive on Mars for a year. However, MOXIE produced only 5 grams of oxygen, which is enough to breathe for about 10 minutes. However, no one expected large volumes from the device. It's an experimental development. In the future, the much-tested devices will be tested in any weather and at different times of day, and if we're lucky, even during dust storms, to understand how it works in different conditions. For example, Opportunity stopped communicating precisely during a giant dust storm, one of the main dangers for both humans and robots. Oxygen is essential, not just for the breathing of those arriving on Mars for colonization. This gas is also needed to bring the colonists back to Earth. To launch a spacecraft from the red planet, 25 tons of oxygen are needed. Finally, let us remind you that scientists have repeatedly found evidence suggesting that there was at least some form of life on Mars. For example, astronomers have studied fragments of the planet that were ejected from its surface as a result of some catastrophic events. The first meteorites were found back in 1911 in the Egyptian desert. As a result of studying these objects, the Antarctic meteorite found in 1984 deserves the most attention. When scientists examined it, they were astonished. Under the microscope, they could see fossils that resembled bacterial colonies. Later, this assumption was completely debunked. But every year, more and more artifacts are added to the collection of evidence for possible life on Mars. Let's think about what life on the red planet could have been like. Considering the low gravity, most likely, the creatures there would have reached gigantic sizes. Tell us in the comments, how do you imagine the living organisms that once inhabited the now dead Mars? Don't you think we're on the verge of a grand discovery on the scale of the solar system? Don't you have the feeling that we haven't been alone in the dark, inhospitable cosmos for a long time? So, where is the search for life headed this time? At the moment, the scientific community's attention is focused on Mars, specifically on the Jezero crater, where the Perseverance rover has been working for 4 years, persistently and tirelessly living up to its name. The latest discoveries made by the rover make us question whether we are truly alone, and also in the idea that oceans of liquid water beneath the crust of a celestial body exist only on distant moons and planets. Perhaps these mysterious bodies of water are much closer than we think. Why was the impact crater on the border of Acetus Planitia and Syrtis Major chosen for research? According to estimates by geologists and astrobiologists, there used to be a lake in this basin with a catchment area of about 17,000 square kilometers. The crater is about 2,700 meters deep at the center, and its diameter is about 49 kilometers. Therefore, in order to imagine what this incredible body of water looked like, you shouldn't let your imagination run wild, but rather restrain it a bit. One thing is clear, the scientists didn't make a mistake with the location, and Perseverance keeps proving it. The rover is equipped with numerous instruments that allow it to thoroughly study the soil, find, and collect the necessary samples. The probe is equipped with spectrometers, a ground-penetrating radar, environmental dynamics analyzers, a camera with excellent image quality, and a high-tech scanner. What tasks have been assigned to the probe and its companion, the tiny helicopter Ingenuity? The main mission is to assess the habitability of Mars by searching for biosignatures, as well as conducting tests in preparation for a human landing on the red planet. And what has Perseverance discovered so far? First of all, it confirmed the assumption that Jezero crater is not just a deep impact pit, but a basin that is actually the bottom of a lake. This is indicated by traces of riverbeds where water once flowed, as well as remnants of sedimentary rocks found by the probe in this location. A giant lake probably splashed here 3.5 billion years ago, early in the celestial body's formation. Who wants to argue with the statement that Mars is a planet of past life? In 2021, Perseverance stunned astronomers with a new discovery. It found organic molecules at the bottom of the crater where it is located. Of course, carbon-containing substances can also appear through non-biological processes. Therefore, such a discovery is not direct evidence of past life, but it does give us something to think about. Do you know what it is? The Mars rover has been most successful in collecting geological samples that densely cover the surface of the red planet. This is a real extraterrestrial museum exhibit that is of great interest to scientists. Which samples of the Martian lithosphere deserve more detailed attention? First of all, it's a rock called Geysers, which the Mars rover discovered in the spring of 2021. Even in the photo, this boulder looks strange. The structure of the find clearly indicates erosion processes that have been affecting the surface of the rock for a long time. The specimen is relatively small, about 20 centimeters in size, but there are no other rocks like this anywhere in the crater, at least not in the areas the rover has visited. The surrounding rocks are smoother and more uniform, while the hedgehog has clearly been exposed to active and prolonged effects of either wind or water. There are suggestions that it belongs to sedimentary lake rocks left over from the time when there was a huge body of water. The rover uses its instruments to analyze the rock's structure and chemistry for possible biosignatures. At the moment, Mars is a cold and dry, inhospitable desert. Could there really have ever been life on it? However, astrobiologists keep repeating that, by analogy with periods of climate change on Earth, such periods could also have occurred on Mars, and they could have lasted for a very long time. So think about it. If a warm Martian period lasted at least 100,000 years, then why shouldn't such an assumption have the right to exist? Thorough soil and rock analysis will help solve this issue. The rocks on Mars that amazed scientists besides the hedgehog are basalt rocks that were named Mas, which means Mars in the Navajo language. Astronomers are puzzling over whether this is evidence of volcanic activity or basalts that were washed into a lake and have remained at its bottom for billions of years. The rock sample was examined in detail thanks to a special instrument built into the rover's camera. During the analysis, clay inclusions were discovered, which indicates direct contact of the rock with water and serves as further evidence that Perseverance is currently moving along the bottom of an ancient lake. Guess how far from the rover? The hardware gripper collected a sample almost immediately after landing on the red planet, just 3 meters away, and those were rocks called Prelezhny or Yiga. The Navajo language was used again. The study of the material raised the same question for scientists. What is the nature of this rock, volcanic or sedimentary? The appearance of the stones is rather unremarkable, but there are small white inclusions visible on them, which makes the sample visually memorable. How well do you know geography? Where is the Bay of St. Paul located? We'll give you a hint. It's a paradise spot on the island of Malta, where, according to legend, the ship of Apostle Paul was wrecked. Why did we recall this place? The thing is, Perseverance discovered a unique rock on Mars, which was later named after this bay. A rock like this is unlikely to be found on Mars, especially in Jezero crater. This is what the artifact looks like. Doesn't it remind you of frog eggs, compressed by some unknown external forces? Small spheres, combined into a single structure, were clearly brought here from another Martian location. Perhaps the movement was aided by water flows, which is why the sample was named that way, because St. Paul's Bay is associated with buoyancy. This is a recent discovery as the rock was found in March 2025. The rock was found near a hill with the intriguing name Witch's Hazel. It is suggested the rock may have rolled from the top of this elevation to the crater's bottom. The hypothesis is also supported by orbital observations, which found dark rock on the crest of the hill that resembles the one discovered. In appearance, this rock is similar to the so-called blueberries found by Opportunity, so astronomers immediately drew an analogy with those stone blueberries. The spherical shape, resembling small berries or popcorn kernels, may well indicate that the boulder formed in a watery environment. Overall, Witch Hazel Hill consists of many layers, demonstrating different geological periods of Mars. A large amount of rock was ejected to the surface here, possibly due to meteorite impacts. The 135-meter hill is an ideal site for scientific research and studying the planet's lithospheric history. The sample, called St. Paul Bay, is being closely studied by the rover. The lack of context makes the process harder. Are there similar rocks on Earth? Yes, and this is a certain type of hematite. Botryoidal hematite forms on our planet under the mandatory condition of groundwater interacting with minerals. In particular, such spherules have been found in some regions of Australia, specifically in sedimentary basins. This type of hematite is also abundantly present in Jurassic sandstones located in the state of Utah. However, let's return to Martian realities. If the popcorn stone was formed in water, then it is quite possible that traces of biosignatures will eventually be found on it. In July 2024, a stone with leopard spots was found in the bed of an ancient river located within the Geysers crater. That's what National Aeronautics and Space Administration scientists called it. What's unusual about it, besides the color gradations, is that, as it turned out later, it has a unique geological structure that may indicate the presence of microbial life. The dark rings on the surface of the stone contain iron and phosphates, while the light spots are made up of sulfur. Why do astrogeologists consider them evidence of ancient Martian microbes? Because on Earth, structures with a similar composition are definitely associated with microbial activity. Calcium sulfate is also present in the texture of the stone, which indicates that water once actively flowed over the boulder. Among other things, the artifact had a surprise for geologists. So-called building blocks of life, carbon-containing organic molecules, were discovered in it. However, the presence of Capella calavina, a rock directly associated with high-temperature volcanic processes, somewhat cools the enthusiasm of scientists. After all, in that case, the biological origin of the leopard spots is ruled out. Overall, much work remains in this area, but National Aeronautics and Space Administration specialists, based on 2 independent studies, have already rushed to announce that the stone with leopard spots is direct evidence of ancient life on Mars. What conclusions can be drawn based on the samples found? The red planet has a complex geology and a rich history, with countless mysteries that astronomers have yet to unravel. The Geysers crater could become the site where evidence of Mars's past habitability is found for the first time. That's true at least because the crater seems to have deliberately gathered many types of rocks, whose origins are explained by completely opposite theories. Unless, of course, you factor in the presence of microbes, then the puzzle fits together perfectly. Have you ever heard about an ocean beneath the Martian crust? No one had before, but thanks to the InSight module, this information has recently come to light. This lander operated on the Martian surface from 2018 to 2022, but it failed during one of the Martian dust storms. However, it transmitted valuable information. By studying Marsquakes using wave methods, the probe also discovered that beneath the surface of the red planet, there is a region through which waves pass. With characteristics similar to those demonstrated by Earth's oceans, this layer is concentrated at a depth of 10 to 20 kilometers. What does the discovery that Mars is likely hiding giant reserves of water tell us? This is a huge potential for further study of the geology of our closest neighbor. News like this makes you think. Even in the Mariana Trench, at a depth of almost 11 kilometers, there is life, and it is abundant. You can at least ask James Cameron about its existence, since he spent more than 3 hours at the bottom of the trench, actively photographing its inhabitants. So if the Martian ocean beneath the crust of the red planet were real, life could have originated there as well. Let's keep this as a rhetorical question for now. If you have a different opinion, be sure to share it. We're interested.